Jacksonville Jaguars fans, welcome in to Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for being here Tuesday, March 18th. Good morning to all y'all. Beautiful day here in Duval County. A little chilly. Going to warm up throughout the day. But the Jaguars, obviously, free agency came hot and heavy last week. Monday, they made a bevy of moves, and they signed 9 players. And the week before that, they cut a bunch of players. They traded Christian Kirk away to the Texans. They let Evan Ingram walk, and now he's headed to Denver, and you saw Mitch Morse retire, so there's a lot of roster turnover here in Jacksonville. And again, the Jaguars signed 9 players, I think 5 of which they view as starters right now, several more as key role players. So we're going to dive into what the Jaguars' needs are after free agency. And free agency is not over by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the Jaguars, for the most part, are done adding players that they think will be starters through free agency until potentially after the draft. James Gladstone, in his press conference last week, his final thing he was asked about was edge and defensive line and those positions and how he kind of views it now moving forward. And he said we could add players in free agency, and I think this was kind of broader than just those 2 positions. He said we could add more players in free agency, right? But those guys might get in the way of draft picks. And so I think the Jaguars have signed the free agents they want to sign before the draft. And they're going to go into the draft and try to get as many good players as they can at positions that they maybe see they could use right now and long term. And then if they miss out on any of those in the draft, maybe they go back to the veteran free agency and say, hey, we thought we were going to get this in the draft. We didn't. Who's out there now? Can we go plug a hole or fill a specific need for this roster? So again, yes, they can sign free agents before the draft, which is a little over a month away now. I don't think they really will sign anyone who projects to be a starter until potentially, again, after the draft. That's how I read what James Gladstone had to say. Again, saying, if we go get a free agent now, they probably are going to stand in the way of a rookie getting on the field. So, in my opinion, the Jaguars, they still have the same needs that they did heading into free agency. I don't think anything has really changed in a major way. They did plug some holes. I think they got 3 guys that I think can be real impact players. One of them being Patrick McCarry, another one being Jordan Lewis, and then also receiver De'Ami Brown. The rest, to me, are either role players or replacement level starters. You got your 2 tight ends that you brought in, who I think are good additions to the tight end room. I think that they execute in a way that will be cohesive, from a blocking standpoint and not being negatives in the passing game. Liam Cohen's going to want guys that can go out there and block. You added Nick Mullins, who's going to be a sounding board in free agency, right? You also added 2 guys who I think are going to start at safety and center. I think those are the replacement level starters, Eric Murray and Robert Hainsey. So, again, I think all the areas that they added to, they can continue to add to. But I do want to say as well, even a team that has some replacement level guys on their roster that are starting, well-coached teams with some premium talent and an offensive and defensive identity, a good culture, those types of teams can win with some replacement level starters. You haven't seen that a lot in Jacksonville. It's been like you have to have good at every single spot to win games in Jacksonville, right? It's kind of felt like that way for a long time. Really well-coached teams who, again, have some premium talent, which the Jaguars do. Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, Tyson Campbell. I think those running backs have shown premium talent and flashes. I think the tackles have shown some premium talent in flashes. Foye Oluokun, right? Well-coached teams with some premium talent and an identity can win with some replacement level starters. That's something that's important, especially if those replacement level starters, you talk about Robert Hainsey, he comes in and again can be a sounding board for Trevor Lawrence, but can also help Trevor Lawrence ID what's going on up front because he comes from this offense that he was in last year with Liam Cohen. So I think that will help the transition a little bit. Not to say that this is how I would have approached free agency. I've talked about it a lot. This is not what I would have done. I would have certainly spent more in certain spots, center and safety being two of them. But this is how the Jaguars are approaching it. They wanted intangibly rich people that can come in and help them win football games. And James Gladstone said they're trying to win the perception battle during the season by winning football games, not being the offseason darlings, right? So that's kind of how the Jaguars are approaching it. Again, I don't necessarily think that that's the way I would have gone, but the Jaguars still have some needs, and we're going to dive into them right now. I just wanted to remind y'all that just because a team has a need, if they are a well-coached team, which that's the hope in Jacksonville, that Liam Cohen's going to be a coach that gets these guys ready, and Anthony Campanile as well. If they are well-coached with a good culture, they can win with replacement level starters. And again, you just haven't seen that a lot in Jacksonville, but you've seen it other places. There's no question about that. So getting into these needs, wide receiver 2. I think wide receiver 2 is clearly the biggest need on the roster right now. You have De'Ami Brown, who again, I think is a starter, but the way I view offense, your top 3 receivers are starters. And I think that he will be a top 3 receiver. I think that he'll have the ability to line outside, the ability to align inside. He lined up throughout his career so far. He's lined up much more outside than inside, but he does have about 20 to 25% of his reps usually in the slot per season. But last year, a lot of his catches did come from the slot. Basically, as an outside receiver, he's a vertical plane type of guy, which that's what the book on Brian Thomas Jr. was coming out of college too. But he obviously showed he can do more than that. I think De'Ami Brown showed last year he can do more than that as well, especially in the screen game. Liam Cohen loves the screen game. It's very diverse in his offense. I think that De'Ami Brown fits that to a T, so he will be a valuable piece to this room. But I don't think you enter the season saying he's definitely your wide receiver 2. So I think the Jaguars are going to prioritize wide receiver in the draft after looking at this more and more. And in my most recent predictive mock draft, I had them waiting a little bit to draft wide receiver because they were able to go get 2 guys early day 3 that I think can kind of have a high impact. But I wouldn't be surprised if these Jaguars do, they have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds, first 2 days of the draft. I'm starting to feel like I'd be pretty surprised if a wide receiver isn't selected in those first 3 rounds to come in and really complement Brian Thomas Jr. and De'Ami Brown. And Brown only signed a 1-year deal. So if he has a good year for the Jaguars, there's a big chance that he goes sign somewhere elsewhere for even better money. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I think wide receiver 2 is a huge, huge need for the Jaguars. I also think safety is still a big need. As I mentioned, Eric Murray does have some versatility. He has a ton of experience. They like what he brings to their defense specifically. And he was very productive for the Texans last year. Had a lot of production when you look at getting his hands on the football, pass breakups, interceptions, tackles, stops. I still think even after adding him, though, who's your other starting safety? Is it Darnell Savage? That's not exciting, right? Dewey, Antonio Johnson, Daniel Thomas. I think they need a starting safety. I think they need one pretty badly. And honestly, Eric Murray probably will only play out 2 years of his 3-year contract here in all likelihood. That's kind of how things have been around here, at least in the past. Maybe that changes a little bit. We'll see. But he's up there in age. Jaguars will be able to save money after year 2. So I think that they probably need to try to address safety multiple times. Not necessarily in this draft, but over the next couple drafts. You definitely need at least one starting safety from this draft. And I think it's a pretty good draft to go find a starting safety. Quite honestly, I do. So we're going to look at the rest of these needs, but first, got to remind you all about Underdog Fantasy. Grab your phone and your dancing shoes. It is time to make entries on March college basketball with Underdog. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward. Signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code DuvalDaily, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit to play. Choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats, i.e. points, assists, rebounds, and more. Y'all already know what I'm doing. I'm selecting my Gator, Walter Clayton Jr., to go higher on points. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Duval Daily to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus Massachusetts and Arizona. Present a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783. Or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Shout out to Underdog Fantasy. If you're supporting them, you are supporting us. Make sure to sign up with code Duval Daily. So, getting into the rest of these needs, as I said, I think that wide receiver 2 and safety are still at the top of that list. Edge 3 is still at the top of that list. And again, going back to James Gladstone's comments, I think that the Jaguars are going to draft an edge player at some point in the first 2 days of the draft. I really do, to come in and be that edge 3 type of guy. They have some candidates to develop into that on the roster already, but I don't think either of them are super exciting, or any of them are super exciting. Deshaun Dixon coming off injury, I think, is still available for them. But you look at Miles Cole last year, the 7th round pick, Yasir Abdullah, I think 4th round pick the year before. Maybe they can get something out of those guys. Who knows? But I do think Edge 3 is a huge priority because they just have not had pass rush outside of Josh and Trayvon the last couple years since Arden Key and DeJuan Smoot. Obviously, Smoot got hurt and was not himself after that. But since Arden Key left that building, and since DeJuan Smoot had his Achilles injury, they have not had a real edge 3. And so I think they need to address that in a big way in the draft. And I would guess 3rd round. They have 2 3rd-round picks. I would guess one of those is an edge guy. Could be earlier. Absolutely could be. But that's kind of where I'm guessing right now. We haven't talked about interior defensive line yet. That's because I don't think it's the biggest need short term. Long term, it's definitely up there. You talk about Eric Armstead. The Jaguars will be able to move on from his contract after the 2025 season if they want to. And now it's not cut and dry. It's not one of those typical contracts you've seen from Trent Baalke in the past. It's you actually kind of have to get out after post June 1 cut. After the 2025 season for Eric Armstead, if you look at it, if you cut him pre-June 1, before the 2026 season, you only have $2.3 million in cap savings and $17.1 in dead money. Post-June 1, however, it goes to $14.5 in cap savings. So, the Jaguars could keep him around beyond the 2025 season, but even if they do, 2026 would be the last year that he's in Jacksonville, in all likelihood. Devon Hamilton is another name that we don't talk about a lot, but Devon Hamilton, I think if you just look at what Devon Hamilton and Eric Armstead have done throughout their careers and what they can be as a tandem, they complement each other well. Devon being that big, bulky interior defensive line presence, Eric Armstead being more of the penetration style guy. But Hamilton is another one where good chance the Jaguars are moving on after the 2025 season. Could they keep him for 2026? Yes. But I feel like there's a good chance they're moving on after the 2025 season with Devon Hamilton, with his salary cap situation, contract situation. He's 28. Last year at this time, he was just trying to get back up to weight after what had happened with the back kind of spinal scary health situation that he had. This year, I think he should be able to approach the 2025 season with a little bit more clarity, not having to try to get back up to weight, all that stuff, just kind of trying to get back to his form prior to what happened there with the abscess. And if y'all remember, before that, he was looking like a dominant interior defensive lineman. And again, Eric Armstead, what he had to deal with last year was coming off of a knee injury, playing a different position, playing edge. So you get Eric Armstead and Devon Hamilton on the interior, and we haven't even talked about Mason Smith. So to me, that is 3 guys you can say, we have a chance to be a pretty strong interior defensive line group here, right? And Mason Smith, I believe in what he can be, but he's got to want it. He's got to own it. And I think that he's going to. I think you saw that down the stretch last year. He started playing some really good football at times. Not always consistent, but you see the flashes, no doubt about it. So, yeah, they've got a group there they can get excited about, but beyond 2025, is Eric Armstead here? Is Devon Hamilton here? If not, all you've got is Mason Smith. And even with Armstead potentially playing a lot better on the interior than he did at edge, and Hamilton potentially playing a lot better, not having to deal with recovering from the abscess situation, and Mason Smith being in year two, I still think interior defensive line, especially long term, is a major need for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And you look how it stacks up, there's a lot of really good interior defensive line talent in this class. If they do not take Mason Smith at 5, I think that they will be landing an interior defensive lineman on the first 2 days of the draft. That would really surprise me if they don't. I still think cornerback is a need. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Tyson Campbell. I really like Jordan Lewis and Jarian Jones. I'm just not convinced that either of those guys is the answer outside. And hopefully I'm wrong about that. Hopefully one of them is. That's what the Jaguars are banking on at this point. But I think you've got to try to find another outside corner. But if you do, then it's like, what was the point of signing Jordan Lewis unless you just don't feel like Jarian Jones needs to be in the starting lineup? It's a whole domino effect of things. But looking at this roster, I really do believe outside corner is still a need. I think running back is a sneaky need. We talk about it, Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne. I think in a Liam Cohen offense, these two guys can look a lot better. But there's still chinks in the armor. And hopefully Liam Cohen can mitigate those a little bit, and coaching can mitigate those a little bit. Neither guy is good in pass protection. Tank Bigsby has fumbling issues, and Travis Etienne kind of has issues with his vision, right? So hopefully an offensive line that executes at a higher level in the run game, a more cohesive run game, better coaching, can get more out of these guys, because you've seen it in flash. And I mean, Travis Etienne, the first 2 years of his career, after he had the Liz Frank in his rookie year, his second year and third year in the league, he was a really effective back. And I know he wasn't the most consistent back at, vision, but he was really darn good. And last year, I think the coaches lost confidence in him, and I think he lost a little confidence in himself as well. I think those two guys can be better, but I still think it's a sneaky need because Travis Etienne, are you going to pay him? What are you going to do with Travis Etienne's contract after the 2025 season? I don't know what they're going to do, right? He's set to be a free agent following the year. And Tank Bigsby, even if you feel like he can be your 1A, if Travis Etienne's a free agent and you let him walk, you need a 1B. And so, and maybe they love Etienne enough to keep him around long term. I'm not sure what his market will be next year. It's going to be pretty fascinating. But this is a very talented running back class, and I think the Jaguars should be in on that class. Whether it's, for me, probably it should be day 3, 4th round or after, just because I think there's going to be a ton of value at that point. And the final spot I wanted to look at is interior offensive line. Yes, they went and got Patrick McCary, who looks like he's going to be starting right guard, but he actually has more experience at center. But you also signed Robert Hainsey, who's a center only. So it looks like your interior of your offensive line is Patrick McCary under contract for the next 3 years. They'll have a team out in all likelihood following the 2026 season. Same thing with Robert Hainsey at center. And then Ezra Cleveland, he's under contract through 2026, but they have a team out following 2025. So you've got 2 guys under contract for 3 years, another guy under contract for 2 years, and all 3 of those you can get out following the second year of the contract. So are any of those guys like Pro Bowl? You're fired up that they're your starters? No. But again, a well-coached team can win with replacement level starters. I think Ezra Cleveland and Patrick McCary can be more than replacement level starters. I'm not convinced that about Robert Hainsey. Watching his tape, I think that there's some limitations. I think the lateral agility is lacking. I think that power can be a big problem for him, dealing with those big interior defensive linemen. The nose tackle types that can have some explosiveness, some juice, and try to just bull rush you back into the quarterback. You saw him have some trouble with that. But good football player. I think all three of them are good enough football players to start, but none of them are like, yes, this is my guy, right? So that's why I think offensive line is so critical for Trevor Lawrence's, continued maturation and development. And so I just think that you've got to address it in the first 2 days of the draft. I really do. But that'll do it. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, what the Jaguars' biggest needs are moving forward. Y'all have a good one.